Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Neil, welcome to Next Economy Now.
Thanks, Sean. Great to be on.
Great to have you. Neil, I'd love to start just by hearing your background, where you came from and how you got into this great work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Well, there's a long story and then there's a short story. The short story is I'm kind of a corporate refugee who had a moment of satori on a business trip and decided to change everything and even rebook my flight and come directly home from Europe. And the main insight that I had was that I sort of reflected on all of my struggles and challenges in life and realized that I had been doing life alone, a kind of solo performance. And it was not only ineffective, but it was boring and very lonely. And that I wanted to do things in a completely different way and make sharing a real core principle of everything that I would do and try to create a life and world for myself and others where it was easy to find love, meaningful work, great conversations, and go on a adventure with people I love to do something important and meaningful and become alive. That was the, I was kind of mid-career and felt like my life hadn't even started. So anyways, I hit the eject button and started almost from scratch in San Francisco in around 2004.
Okay.
And just started building a community around, finding the others and building a community around the idea. And one thing led to another. And I started Shareable in 2009. And I went from being the kind of sharing guy in San Francisco to being known wider with Shareable also as being kind of part of a community that's really focused on sharing and also voicing it as a powerful strategy and a relevant strategy for now.
So I'm assuming it must have worked for you. If you have, having this epiphany. Oh, wait a minute, maybe there's a different way. I mean, I'm curious how those early days worked out. Was your epiphany based on seeing somebody else or other people being more engaged or interactive, or was that a real leap of faith? I mean, it's a little bit crazy to jump out and from the mainstream culture and go for sharing and.
Yeah, there was kind of a long gradual lead up, and the intellectual foundation was there. Like I had done the reading, I was doing strategy work for a Fortune 50 transportation company. I understood the global context, and I kind of a industry strategist by trade. So, and analyzing things, came naturally to me, and then coming up with plans based on that. Okay. And so the intellectual foundation was there. And on this business trip, the other shoe dropped, and that was the kind of spiritual and emotional piece, which is really what generated the commitment, because I had the knowledge and I hadn't made the choice, right? But then when I had the insight, this kind of at a spiritual level, for lack of really a better word, I mean, it really did feel like something was flowing through me, that not of me, just a vehicle. And it's like, wow, I really see something now. I'm being shown something and I cannot ignore it. I have to act. And that's why, I punched out. So, kind of dramatically, like I left like the next day, I got up on a plane and, letter of resignation, like right after I had that moment, and boom, I was out of there.
Were you scared?
No, I wasn't scared, and maybe that's foolish, but part of the reason I was scared is because I've always lived a kind of frugal life. And so I didn't have a lot of huge expenses or debt. And, and I am, privileged. So I also could act on this. But what explained the lack of fear more than anything is that moment was a relief, because it was the first time that I felt like I was really committed to something. And this was a feeling I had never had before. And it was really an existential kind of torture to like not know, why am I here? And my career was a sort of, actually earlier in my life I had kind of said like, man, I can't figure it out right now. I just, I'll go and I'll do some work. I'll learn some things. I'll put away some money. And I just, I was at a loss, right? I didn't have the references or the connections or the knowledge to think my way out of it. So I had to, just move forward and try to find a way.
So thanks for sharing this. This is, it's important because I think there's a lot of folks that are still in that circumstance, right? And, this is one of the things that we want to do at Lift Economy is invite them into the next realm. So I'd be curious to hear from you. So that, that's a little background on what you were feeling and experiencing before you made this shift. After you made this shift, what was the impact like for you, just for your quality of life? I mean, I want to get more.
Yeah, sure.
We'll get deeper into more of some of the solution sets that you're into, which is
exciting. Of course.
Just on the personal level.
Yeah.
How did it work out for your own quality of life on a day-to-day basis? Like, is this sharing thing cool? Like, did you meet some nice folks? Did it work out?
Man, it worked out. The bottom line is it really worked out. I like to research things. I read a lot of books. And so I kind of understood some things, and I also like to experiment. So real life experiences mean a lot also. So it's like a way of learning that balances those two things. And so I went on a kind of deeper dive on the research. I talked to as many people as I could. And then I started my own kind of sharing project, a salon. I started with some friends in 2005 called the Abundance League, which was a gift circle with a speaker and also a potluck in the middle.
I remember hearing about Abundance League.
Yeah. And I did that with the community for 5 years. And that was really the thing that confirmed it all for me, that the huge qualitative difference that sharing and collaboration made and being part of a community of purpose made. And, the secret sauce of that gathering was the gift circle, where everyone, this is what we did at every meeting to kick it off, is everyone shared 3 things, what they were passionate about, what their needs were, and that could be related to their project or passion. And then also what they could offer the community in terms of, connections or knowledge or help, or labor, what have you. And then there would be a break, and then everyone would just match up and exchange their gifts and needs, right? Or meet their gifts, meet their needs and so forth. And if what was interesting, if you do that over time or regularly with a regular group of people, and there was kind of regulars who would come over and over, also new people that would circulate in and out, then you create a network based on purpose. And when you help people and help each other with things that you're truly passionate about, that are really connected to your core purpose as a person, then you've made a very special bond. And also anything that you put in, it comes back like tenfold. It's not linear, So it took like 18 months to get there. And then it was a totally different way of getting things done. It seemed like I could get access to almost anything I needed through relationships. And my friends networked me. I didn't have to network. They knew enough about my purpose that they moved me like a chess piece on this, sort of larger social board, right? Or quantum board. And instead of, fighting and competing and having sharp elbows to be successful and, moving up some sort of ladder, then it was more like my destiny was being pulled towards me. I was like an attractor towards for the resources I need to do my purpose, to act, and fulfill my purpose. So it was just the mirror image of what it's like to work in a market economy.
I love that, especially, from a business lens. We're looking for efficiencies in the system, and then it turns out that being on purpose is the most efficient and effective thing that you can do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is, yeah, like efficiency is definitely overrated. And also, and I come from a strategic planning background, also planning has limitations there too. Because if you plan for a certain thing, you might be cheating yourself of the 10x that's there, and not just resources, but experience. And so be open to what can come beyond the plan. And purpose is really what gets you there. Purpose and also the community and the connections, the reciprocity, being there for people when they really need it on the things that are most important to them.
Well, I'd like to connect it to, you shared your experience kind of making a decision to share. What have you seen just in popular trends in the last 15 years? Are more people getting on with this? Is it particular to any part of the world? Are we here in America? Are we in the backwaters of sharing?
Yeah.
Here's some of your high-level perspective on this.
Yeah, well, I'll share a little bit about the genesis of Shareable, which kind of answers the question. Through Abundance League, I met a foundation that was interested in doing something around sharing. They asked me and also the company Free Range Graphics, Lewis Fox and Jonas Sachs.
Yeah, those guys. That's great.
Yeah, they're great. And they got the call initially, and they said, we need to bring Neil in because I've been working on this and had a reputation of being knowledgeable about it. And so I helped them write the plan. That we got the grant. And in the research, though, the research question was, how can we start a movement for sharing? And then, when I did the research, I was like, oh, wow, there is already a huge trend across almost every sector I could find towards sharing and collaboration, people reinventing how they do things out of necessity and from choice, wanting to do things differently, have a different experience and different results. And our job wasn't necessarily to start a movement. It was to more witness it, connect the dots on it, and be a catalyst, right? And try to guide it as much as possible for a small, relatively small nonprofit. So that's why we kind of launched first with a sort of magazine to start painting the picture and connecting those dots. Anytime, there is an economic kind of crisis, and we started, right after the Great Recession, you have a surge in all kind of sort of people-driven solidarity economics, right? In addition to that this go round, though, was with the rise of social media, with the internet, with Creative Commons, this became an ethos of sharing transferred from net culture to the wider population. That's a shift that we helped along, and it's gone in some different directions, some good and some not so great. The quote unquote sharing economy has gone off the rails and is kind of just, business as usual and maybe even particularly aggressive form of it. At the same time, that idea of sharing as being something important has come into the popular imagination.
Can you say more about what's known now as the sharing economy and what might be the critique?
Yeah, sure. When we started, we painted this picture of all the different things that represented this sort of a sharing kind of transformation, a kind of epic sort of shift, right? Open source software and tool libraries and, social media and the sharing economy, cooperatives and all the things that within the solidarity economy, open government and bike sharing and car sharing, and I could just go on, right? And anytime we would talk to the press, we would paint this picture, and they would only talk about the business piece. They would only talk about the startups, right, and the apps. It went from there to later, a couple of years on, all the money started to flow in. So the company started to change, and also the story started to change. It went from not this big palette of sharing innovations that we were writing, going to just the startups, and then it went to just a couple of startups, Airbnb, Lyft, and Uber. And they became the story and synonymous with the sharing economy. And as all that money flowed in, all of the communitarian sort of ethos and vibe and a lot of the purpose, frankly, was left by the wayside because, venture capitalists seek the highest returns of any other type of investor. And the pressure is tremendous for founders and management team to deliver on those expectations. And the VCs are the most powerful stakeholder, and they start to shape the company into not a service for the public or a service for its users, but as a commodity that can be sold in the global marketplace, that the company itself they go through this process. Once they get all of that cash, the VCs are looking for an exit, and they turn the business into a commodity which they can sell quickly. So they're looking for a flip. They're not looking to necessarily build a legacy business. That could happen in the long term, but that's not their interest. They're looking for a 10x or more return. And so a lot of the ethics go out the window. Uber is a good example. I mean, really, they have experienced a kind of ethical collapse that has impacted their future as a company and their ability for the investors to get an exit. And that's the reason why the CEO is out, right? It's not because of the ethics and rule breaking and law breaking. And the fact, to quote Harvard Business Review, is that they said this. I mean, this is really striking for Harvard Business Review to say this. They called Uber an illegal enterprise, fundamentally illegal. And that's how we saw it, right? They just disregarded the rules and leveraged their capital and the sort of tech meme about progress, about, the inevitability of changes, and that they represented this, and just steamrolled everyone in their path, right? So the people who really paid the price for this are the workers, the contractors, and the hosts. They are subject to exploitation and don't have a lot of control over their work environment. The terms change constantly. They're managed algorithmically. So if you get a bad rating or X number of bad ratings, you're out of there. You have, if you're on their app, Uber, and you've refused so many rides, they ding you, so you have to keep driving. And they, treat you as an employee, yet the legal relationship or the relationship they want to have is a contractor. And this was where they got in the most trouble legally, at least in terms of the size of the fines. They were fined like $100 million, or there's a settlement, a labor misclassification settlement of around $100 million, I think California and Massachusetts. So this is the critique.
Well, let's talk about the solutions.
Yeah.
What are you seeing that's most exciting to you? What's emerging now that really embodies the principles that we want to see?
Yeah, so to connect directly with the problem with this enterprise and what could be the antidote is a movement that we helped catalyze in 2015. We hired Nathan Schneider to write a feature story about a new class of startups emerging that brought together or married cooperative business structure with a platform approach to the market. And so now it's 2 years later, it's a movement. There's an annual conference. There's the Platform Co-op Consortium and a group of companies that are cooperating and more coming on board. An example of that is, there's a couple of good ones. Like there's Green Taxi in Denver, which has ride hailing. It's a newer co-op, but it's 800-member worker cooperative where the drivers own and control the business. Wow. And so you get the best of both worlds, a well-paid, motivated workforce that controls their working conditions and wages, and the convenience of ride-hailing, right, through the smartphone. You have Stocks United, which is a stock photo marketplace online where the photographers are the worker owners. And there's about 900 worker owners in that. They do, last year they did over $10 million in revenue. You go to their site and look at it, and it's beautiful. So this is a successful business generating revenue online, treating the workers right, making a profit or returning profit to members already and only being a few years old. So those are two good examples of what's possible, that there isn't. Now I think that's part, the deeper message is that there is not just one way to do startups, okay? That there are multiple ways and multiple patterns, and the platform co-op is yet another option. And then the other thing I want to talk about, we can get deeper into this, but just I want to bring it to the fore now, is it's not just about the structure of the individual enterprises. It's about the ecosystem.
Say more about that.
Yeah, so the platform co-ops, that's a great development, yet unless there is a supportive network of institutions, finance, legal, regulatory, awareness, culture, media, then it's not going to work, right? Or it will struggle to scale, right? And you have to think about capitalism and all the institutions that have built up over hundreds of years, all the innovations, the laws, the corporation as we know it now is something that has evolved legally over a couple of hundred years, right? Especially since the Civil War, have they gained so much power and so many rights? Right. This is how we have to think about getting an economy that works for people and planet, is we need that ecosystem. And, I live in Silicon Valley, and there is an incredible ecosystem to create highly exploitative companies, right? They do it better than anyone, right? It's like amazing. They're so good at it. It's like a factory for exploitative companies, But there is also a kind of mirror image of this in places like Emilia-Romagna, a region in sort of central Italy. Bologna is the capital, the major city, where 30% of the economy is cooperative. Something like 70 or 80% of residents are members of a cooperative. But underneath that is an incredible set of financial institutions, laws, and regulations that make it work and institutionalize it, make it stable and viable over the long term, and contribute substantially to like raising the standard of living and building a middle class. And there's a lot of communities and cities who want to be the next Silicon Valley, and it's like, oh no, don't do that, don't do that, because that will be terrible for your residents, It'll be great for a few business people, but overall for the community could get completely hollowed out like it has where I live, where we've got RV communities. Okay, so there's Stanford University. It's right along El Camino, which is one of the main drags on the peninsula.
Yep.
And there is like 1.5 mile long line parked along El Camino next to Stanford of broken down RVs of people who can't afford housing.
Wow. Yeah, East Palo Alto, right? It's one of the poorer communities in the Bay.
Yeah, but this is right. Yeah, that's true. And this is right next to Stanford, though.
Oh, this
is like right in the middle of Palo Alto. And then where I am in Mountain View, there's one of the bigger parks is Rangsdorf Park, and they have the same thing. Along the railroad tracks on the east side of the park is the same thing, is an RV camp. And this is people living there. They've got their generators going, they got their barbecue grills out and their chairs out and all this stuff. So the housing situation has gotten so out of control. There's 10,000 homeless people in Silicon Valley. There's about 6,000 in San Francisco. There's 80 tent communities and tent camps in San Francisco. The other thing is that
you're seeing it get worse, right?
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse. I mean, also you have this exodus. So you've got people of color and artists and activists and community spaces and art galleries and bookstores, like they're gone, And the thing that made San Francisco great, that attracted people in the first place, has now been kind of figuratively speaking paved over.
So are we seeing any of this type of ecosystemic support that you're identifying as critical? Are we seeing any of this in the United States?
Yeah, more and more cities are adopting, and it's in our book, and we've got a review copy out of Sharing Cities Activating the Urban Commons.
This is your new book?
Yeah, this is the book that Shareable and all our fellows put together. We worked 18 months on it and collected examples of model policies and case studies from all over the world of a kind of people-driven economy for cities, that builds social capital and builds the community up as opposed to kind of hollowing it out. And we are offering it as a kind of antidote, like, no, don't be the Silicon Valley of X, be the next, Mondragon, be the next Emilia-Romagna region. There's another example to follow. And so you see cities like New York City and a few others like adopting policies that support the development of cooperatives. It's great, and also not nearly at the scale that we see in these more established regions. But it's a start, and it could get there. But what it requires people to get involved and guide the policy discussion in a certain direction and get off of this like Silicon Valley dream. It's not a miracle, it's a cautionary tale.
So let's hear more about the book. How's it structured? What's inside the book?
I would describe it as a kind of catalog of hope. It represents a concrete utopia.
It means that if all of the solutions you're talking about are implemented in whole, you would theoretically have a
full sharing city, city run by people for the people.
Everybody would be having their basic needs met?
Yes, exactly. That's the idea. And yeah, so it's here. It just needs to be pulled together. We've got 133 case studies and model policies. We talk about green taxi. There's housing, food, transportation. There's 11 chapters. There's 4 of the core. We have one chapter on jobs. It really just illustrates the power to do what we need to do to address the key problems like inequality and climate change and unraveling of the social, contract and fabric, that we don't have to wait for a solution to come to us, that the solutions are here and we can act today on them. And I think that's super important in the kind of times we live right now.
Well, Neil, I just really want to appreciate you and the team at Shareable for doing this. And, likewise, we're so delighted to have you with us today on Next Economy Now, because this is exactly our point, is that we have the solutions in existence, documented, but we don't have them in whole.
Right.
So we can't look at, certain city and see it all functioning well, but we can look at each splinter, so to speak, and somewhere on the world, somebody's doing it beautifully, or a group of people are doing it beautifully in a way that benefits the community, that's building biodiversity, benefiting the environments, benefiting the economy, but we don't have it in wholeness. So I really want to appreciate you and your team for putting this volume together.
Yeah.
And now what? We just need to get people to read it. And
yeah, that's a great question.
Do you have a call to action or?
Yes. Step 1, read the book. And step 2, create a transition plan drawing from material on the book, and Shareable can help with that. We're going to launch a campaign as a way to engage people and help communities and individuals, go down this track.
How would that compare or contrast to our friends at the Transition Network, right? Because that's.
I think it's very similar. I think they do an awesome job, and they've over the years have really shifted to new economy thinking, and which is I think really inspiring and dead on. And I think we need many different approaches, and they have a certain history and a certain set of biases, and we're coming out from a different perspective as well. And I think we can play well together and head in the same direction.
Right. We need more people. It's a plurality of solutions, right? Rather than everybody has to buy the Shareable book and follow that as the manual. That's just an option.
Exactly. And, I make a point in the introduction I wrote for the book of saying, we don't need any more orthodoxies. The Commons definitely needs to rise in its prominence in terms of a solution we need to consider. It needs to come mainstream, but we don't want to repeat the mistake of neoliberalism, which posited that there is no alternative. We imagine a kind of heterodox economy, that there are synergy between the different ways to create value between the market, between government and the commons. And I believe for the commons to work, government has to be strong, and also the market has to have integrity, right? And serve the common good and not be exploitative.
Neil, can you tell me what you mean by the commons and why is that important?
Yeah, the commons, okay, just a quick definition. There's 3 things in a commons. There's a common pool asset, the thing to share. And that can be a forest, it can be a business, it could be software. The second thing is a community of users. And then the third, and maybe the most important thing, and the thing that people often leave out and forget, is that there's a governance process that controls how the resource is accessed, how it's maintained. And it's a governance process that can evolve, and that is also culturally consistent with the group, with the users. And it's why it's important is that often, the one sentence sort of summary of Nobel laureate, Elinor Ostrom's work on the commons is that often this approach to managing resources is more effective than the state or the market. So it works. She took this even further and kind of adapted it to addressing climate change. And she made the argument on a paper she wrote just before she died that a commons-based approach, a kind of distributed approach driven locally, a polycentric approach, you would say, could be more effective than the attempts at aligning everyone at a global level, which obviously, is not working in some very important ways, right? So people need to act. She was saying people can act in their local community at the city and regional level, and an aggregate could have more impact and act faster.
So that would imply that potentially there's some type of decentralized intelligence, an intelligent principle that's organizing all life simultaneously and can't necessarily be commanded and controlled from a single viewpoint or perspective? Yeah,
the thing about the commons is it's a flexible construct, and you could even say it's a kind of archetype because it's an ancient sort of method and technology for human beings to cooperate and manage their resources for the long term, for centuries and even thousands of years, right? And it's adaptable. People can take that construct and use it in a way that's consistent with their mores, with their culture, with their values. That's kind of, this is really, sort of painting with a broad brush here, but that's how Ostrom saw it, is that the local adoption of that paradigm and, cities working together could move us faster to a solution to climate change.
Just for listeners, right? We're having a podcast now. What elements of the commons are in play? just in somebody listening to this recording?
Yeah, like what kind of commons? Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's, well, the book has a lot of examples, but I'll throw some out there. Yeah. One of the most interesting examples is in Bologna. They started a project. They passed a new regulation for the care and regeneration of the urban commons, and also put together a kind of process for this to work. And it started when there were some women in a square. They wanted to have some benches in the square, and they wanted to put them in. They were willing to pay for it, right? And they went to the city and said, how do we do this? We'd like to donate some benches to our park, to their piazza, And no one had an answer. They were sent around the bureaucratic maze and there's no solution. And so what they decided to do is create a solution where residents can contribute to actual city building, very tangible, painting things, taking care of schools, running schools, putting in park benches, cleaning public space. And they, through a mechanism called collaboration pacts, they work with the city to decide the scope of the project. They agree on it, and then they become one of hundreds of collaboration pacts that the city forms with its residents to take care of the city, right? And the importance of this is it sort of addresses a lacuna in a hole, a missing link or missing space in administrative law where residents can't contribute to their community, right? Administrative law for cities is written in a way that see residents as subjects, not actors, that they receive services, they can't deliver services or contribute actively. And so I think this is like a very good illustration of the urban commons and what's possible.
Neil, if you could design a particular intervention that would kind of make a leap forward, what would it be? Could you pick one? Or
wow,
you
yeah.
Say, no, that's the wrong question to ask. I'm curious.
Yeah, I used to be a kind of like lover of silver bullets, and now I'm old and wizened, I guess. It just goes back to this idea that you need an ecosystem, and then it develops slowly. You have to build. It's iterative process, right? And maybe that's the intervention is like
patience.
is
giving people patience.
Giving people patience. Or there's a different conception or experience of time in civil society than the market. You can't judge civic processes by market time, right? So you have to, and the point is completely different. In the civic arena, the deliberation is the product. The end is important, but I think the deliberation and what is built from that is much more important. And when you start to see the economy and government as a process of people solving problems together, flexing their collaborative muscles, becoming a citizenry, becoming a public, that this is the best investment that you can make, right? That result is what pays dividends over centuries and even longer. The example of the Emilia-Romagna region, comes to mind. Back in the 12th century, the first university in the Western world, it was a cooperative. In the Middle Ages, it was a independent city-state. And then recently now you have this cooperative sector. 30% of the economy is cooperative. This ethic has been built and has served that region and the people that bring it alive so well. And this is what we need to really focus on. We need to build civic culture that gives us all of those positive externalities.
So more process as outcome rather than the single fix that puts this into motion. Yeah,
exactly. And I see this pattern over and over again on Shareable is like, you see these virtuous cooperative circles, right? So it's like this village in Seoul. It's an urban village, Sungmisan urban village, right? And they started off, 10 or so years ago, protesting some development nearby. And then they decide, let's do a co-op childcare. Let's do a cooperative school. Let's start a cooperative green product store. Let's start a bunch of different clubs. Let's do music festivals and theatrical productions and regular community celebrations, right? And 10 or so years later, you have a completely transformed community, operates in a completely different way, and is very enriching for the citizens. And the way of life is one in which it supports the development of human beings and of a community. And I think that's the really, important message, that these positive upward spirals are possible. You just got to take it step by step, put in the supportive institutions, in a decade or 2 decades time, maybe longer, then you're going to get your transformation.
Thanks for sharing that story. It reminds me of to me, it follows a parallel of your personal life becoming really robust and engaged. And that's a pattern I see, tracking these solutions as they're more abundant than we ever thought possible.
Absolutely. And it's like in this cooperative school, like in this urban village in Seoul, they have a real emphasis on peer learning. So they bring in the elders to teach carpentry and photography and pottery and also accounting and how to run a business. And like, it's so rich, and that's when I read about and research and, show these stories, like I've been doing this since 2009, and it's like, I never get tired of these stories. I read them and, sometimes I cry because I'm like, yes, that's it. That's what we need, more of this, and I want more of this for me. I want more of this for you, and that's what really drives me and also Shareable.
So, Neil, how can our listeners help? What do you need at Shareable?
I would say go on the site, sign up for our weekly e-newsletter. We will have an announcement about our campaign and our book release, so you can get that when it comes out. We'll have a free version, a PDF version, and you can get e-reader versions and a print copy for paying some X price, which we haven't decided yet. So that's the place to start. Yeah, go to the website, shareable.net, sign up for our newsletter. There's a box at the bottom of the homepage. You could also find us at Shareable on Twitter and also facebook.com/Shareable on Facebook.
And I'll go ahead and give a plug. Shareable newsletter is one of the best newsletters, one of the few I actually read because I always see something juicy and good and new in there. So I really appreciate you guys for putting out the work.
Thank you, Sean. And the appreciation is mutual. I really love a Lyft Economy and what you guys done. And I've known you guys for years and watched your careers blossom and go in this direction. And I'm very inspired by you.
Thanks, Neil. Well, any final words for our listeners?
Let's try to create a world where we can all become fabulous human beings and live in incredible communities. Let's do it. That's my message.
We can do it.
Yeah. Yes.
It's real. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Neil. We look forward to continuing to build this reality with you.
Likewise. Thanks, Sean.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lyft Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.